Welcome to Yoga Relationship. My name is Dr. Brees, and I'm a pastoral counselor, meditation researcher, and yoga therapist. And I'm really grateful that you have found me through the wild world of the internet. I wanted to talk to you today specifically regarding the definition of yoga relationship and what this brand is, what it is that I have to offer you, how I can be of service, and the things and solutions that I think could be really impactful in moving your life forward when it comes to things like complex trauma, codependency, and relational struggles. So yoga relationship is essentially bhakti yoga. That's how you translate bhakti yoga, is yoga of relationship. There are many forms of bhakti yoga. That is something that in the world of Yoga Alliance and the International Association of Yoga Therapy is somewhat uncommon. There are certain teachers that have a bhakti lineage where they have a devotional component of yoga, but for the most part, when one thinks of yoga, one thinks of asana, or the physical postures and movements. That's not what this is. So if you are interested in postures and fitness yoga, you'll want to keep searching because you're not going to find that here. We will move. We have practices. Asana is 1/8 of the system of yoga, so it's important. But mainly this is about moving past just asana, which yes is important and has value, and into the true heart and meaning of yoga. So yoga means union, yoking, coming together, specifically with God. And a lot of people sort of skirt around that. They're confused about what to do with that, right? Like, well, this can't mean that in the secular world that wants to use yoga for these empirical methods that are subject to the scientific method. Well, I'm excited to report that in the methodology and research regarding trauma, especially God attachment, is something that specifically devotional yoga deals with really well. So what is God attachment? So we have attachment with the caretakers, the parental figures in our life, when we're born. And this attachment creates these bonds that last the rest of our life and impact how we love. They're literally our love templates. And when there is addiction, mental illness, abandonment, neglect, substance use issues within those relationships in a family system, then what happens is that the dysfunctions that were used to cope with that reality in childhood become evident in the adults' romantic relationships and specifically in their families and marital lives. And so with adult survivors of family trauma specifically, yoga relationship offers something really unique in addressing God as a member of the family system. Now, I'm guessing if you found me here that perhaps you're trying to figure out, like, how does God and yoga come together in a world, especially here in the West? And I am speaking to you from Minnesota in the United States. And there was, during the 60s and 70s, a movement of spiritual seeking that brought yoga to the West, and specifically was mass marketed by 30 modern yoga gurus that brought it here and said, actually, yoga is not a religion. And this is true. The experts in yoga, specifically Dr. David Frawley, who is one of the leading experts on yoga, explains that yoga is essentially an advanced science of meditation. So in essence, it is meditation, and it means union, which makes sense because all of the world religions meditate just like they pray. And even though all of the world religions pray and meditate, that doesn't mean there aren't distinctions that are appropriate. And this is absolutely the case within yoga. So there's a lot of debate about that. But at the end of the day, instead of sort of trying to force yoga into a category of physical fitness with physical therapy and asana as a sort of fitness fad, what yoga relationship is seeking to do is to take it into its proper context, which is including a healing relationship and attachment, including with God as a member of the family system, with pastoral counseling as a mechanism of action which catalyzes this union. And this mechanism of action in meditation is actually present across all forms of meditation. Now, different forms of meditations are proving more helpful, treating different pathology, but at the end of the day, that is what meditation is. And so as a Christian, that would involve reuniting with God in the Garden of Eden, being made in the image of God. And that reality is different than somebody who is Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, secular. And if you've been through yoga teacher training yourself, you might understand that, yes, there is not a single form of any of this taught, but a sort of a conglomeration of all of it, of the various Hindu, Buddhist, secular, Christian adapted forms of yoga as therapy, which is what yoga has evolved to become in the West today. And so that's really what I want to share with you, is this distinction that in transpersonal psychology, which is spiritual psychology or the psychology of religion, what one is looking at is really humanity's relationship with the divine. And from this perspective, this is where AA was born, Alcoholics Anonymous. It was actually a transpersonal psychology modality of appealing to an authority, to God, but this authority had to be outside of oneself, what they call a higher power. And in this way, AA and the other recovery models have followed this interfaith perspective, which one might use words like creator, source, spirit for God instead of God, especially if you were raised in religious dysfunction, if you were raised in fundamentalism, if you have found the mystical path of Christianity, and you want to include your faith, but you're a little confused about how to do that, or perhaps that's not your personal resonance, but you want to seek to understand the devotional component of working with this higher power in the context of yoga as therapy. This is something that I found in the research gap was unaddressed to date. So there was a lot of sort of in the 60s and 70s throwing around of the term yoga of relationship or the yoga of relationships, however grammatically you want to approach that, in reference to a very sexualized form of yoga or tantra, which is different than what I'm hoping to address here. Really coming back to God as the stabilizing force that can transcend specifically the dysfunction potentially in human romance, and looking for a stability within romantic love that one can only actually find with the divine is unwise. That this is what God is calling us to, is to this relationship. And so if you have been hurt by the church, if you have considered yourself de-churched, if you are a spiritual seeker, and you are looking to Jesus as more than just a great spiritual teacher, but as a true Lord and Savior, that this is what this work is really for. Everyone is welcome here in the yoga relationship. You don't have to agree with me about who I believe Jesus to be as Lord and Savior and God. But that is the space that we are seeking to create here, is an interfaith and faith-based place. And the short term for that would be devotional yoga therapy. And this is the transpersonal intersection between faith, meditation, and traumatology, specifically using things like dialectic behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. Christians are being faced with the reality that nowadays there is a lot of empirical support for using the meditative sciences and coming back to Christian meditation as an empirical form of addressing these specifically relational trauma wounds that fail to respond to talk-only therapies. And that's because trauma, especially when it is complex in nature, such as codependency, it stems from one's early childhood, it stems from relational developmental trauma, and it lives on for a lifetime if it is left undressed, and it will not necessarily heal with time. And so dealing with the issue of faith while also creating a safe place to have different opinions is really what this ministry is about. And so I want to welcome you here. I want to welcome you to this page. I have a couple things that I'd like to share with you in terms of ways that I can support you on this journey. So the first is a workbook. So I've created this workbook, Yoga Relationship Workbook. You can find a copy of this on Amazon. Currently it's on sale. But this is really the starting point I would recommend if you're sort of just tooling around YouTube and you're looking for sort of a way to dip your toes in this methodology and get started, get a little bit more information. I also have some free resources available on my website if you want to pop over to yogarelationship.co, and I'll include those links as well here below. But those are some ways to get started specifically in addressing relational trauma using the tools of devotional yoga therapy and pastoral counseling, and really get to know me, get to know my methodology, where I came about in terms of my story and journey getting to this point, and then grounding that within the research base through a peer-reviewed empirical study that I did during my doctoral dissertation. And so that's really the basics in terms of getting started. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, I also have this workbook embedded as an e-workbook within the mini course, which would be my 15-hour getting started course if you're interested in getting to the bottom of your struggle with relational trauma, codependency, grief, motherhood issues, and really living the householder path, including your relationship with the divine, is instead of being a means to escape the world and to escape the demands of householding, instead to really live the modern mystic sort of shamanic initiate path here in the world, and learning how to do that in a way that can also honor faith, honor the authority of the Bible, honor the differences in world religions and approaches, while still appreciating the culture that is classical yoga in its theory as well. So if any of that interests you, I'm really excited to get to know you, to get started, to work together. And I really hope that you have a great rest of your day, and look forward to working with you soon.